Hello, friends. Pastor Sam Dennis here on Monday of Holy Week. This is a wonderful week for celebration, and I'm taking the opportunity just to share a few devotional thoughts during the week with you guys, and hopefully these will speak to you as much as my thoughts about all this has spoken to me. On Monday, most scholars do concur that Jesus entered the temple. Matter of fact, it's recorded in Matthew, Mark, and Luke's gospel, this event that I'm going to read to you about out of Matthew's gospel. It's Monday morning, and he went into town and went into Jerusalem there. He'd probably been staying the night with his friends in Bethany and went down into Jerusalem, and he went straight to the temple and he began to teach. But when he was there, when he arrived there, he had some business that he wanted to tend to. And he spoke a harsh word, really, about what was going on in that place. You know, I've thought about this a lot. If Jesus were to come to our churches today, what would he say? Will we even recognize him? Where would he sit? What would he do? What would he have to say about our worship? All the things that we are engaged in. Let me just read you a little bit of this narrative out of Matthew's gospel and see if you can follow along with what I'm trying to share with you. And Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who sold and bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it into a den of robbers." And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and scribes saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children crying out of the temple, "Hosanna to the Son of David," they were indignant. And they said to him, "Do you hear what those are saying?" Jesus said to them, "Yes, have you never read? Out of the mouths of infants and nursing babies, you have prepared praise." And leaving them, he went out of the city to Bethany and lodged there. There's really no issue with what took place on Monday. Most scholars agree that he cleansed the temple. What is a discussion sometimes is how many times did he cleanse the temple? A lot of people have struggled with the fact that John mentions a cleansing that occurred early in Jesus' ministry. And they try to justify that because John says it one way and it happened this way, they put it into question, but there's no question in my mind. I think sameness doesn't necessarily mean this has to be similarity. And here we have a situation where obviously Jesus cleansed the temple 2 times. But each of the synoptic gospels share this story. And I think it's important to note, especially the way in specificity that Jesus dealt with those who were making trade there. To give you a bit of the background, people were often poor and could not afford to bring their offering, and even if they could, they wouldn't want to haul it from a long way off. And so there was a provision that in the court of the Gentiles, or maybe by the pool on the outer ports of the temple area, you could buy your needed sacrifice. And the thing that was interesting about this is that in order to be someone who could sell a pigeon in a sacrificial way like that for those who came, they had to work within the system. In other words, the Jews, the leaders, the religious leaders of that day and time, were taking some money on the side from those who were bartering a position to get a good table so that they could do what they did. And obviously, Jesus wasn't concerned about their sacrifice. What he was concerned with was the heart and what was going on there. The place was intended to be a place of worship and prayer. Whether someone brought in a sacrifice or not, it was a holy place. And to see it reduced down to a moment of profiteering, so to speak, was something that really got his ire up. Obviously, the parallels can be drawn with our churches today. What goes on? We live in a day and time in which large churches are more the common than they used to be. I remember when they first started coming out, and I was young in my ministry, we all thought, well, these mega churches won't last. Well, not only have they not lasted, they've continued to grow in popularity, and rightly so. They're able to offer so many things and opportunities and ministries that a lot of smaller churches can't. That's not to say that smaller churches are not important, but you can see, and I have seen witness of how these great churches have such an impact, especially when they're careful with the funds that God has given them and they use them for good. And that's what I want to say. It's not the size of the church or the ability or quality of the building. I've been in humble churches in which people were stingy and they treated the place like a den of thieves. And I've been in large churches where that was true as well. It's the heart. You know, man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. And what would it be like if Jesus were to arrive in your church today, in my church, or into our home worship, our own homes today, as we sit and talk to him and talk about him? What would he say of us? Would he ridicule us as well? You know, after he made that statement, it says in Matthew's gospel that he continued to heal the blind and the lame. He was doing his work there. I don't want to leave the impression or the picture that Jesus was this madman. Of course he wasn't. He was God's son, holy and righteous in every way, filled with love and joy. But he called out sin when he saw it. And he calls that out in us today. You know, we all want Jesus to be the Jesus we want him to be. We want Jesus to fit into our model or mold. But on this Monday of Holy Week, maybe we should ask ourselves, how is my worship? How is my church? How is my attitude when I go to church? What am I looking for? What am I there for? What is my purpose? It's a house of prayer. It's a place where people go to get healed and to be changed. One last story. When I first got in the ministry, we started our services on Easter. And I remember in the early days, I always loved Easter because it's the High Holy Week, and it's my favorite time to preach, obviously. And I had a friend or a person who was close with me in the church come to me one day and said, "Pastor, does it bother you that on Easter everybody shows up?" I looked at him kind of crazy. I said, "Pardon me?" He said, "Does it bother you that everybody shows up and you know in your heart that that's just maybe the only Sunday they're going to be there?" And I said, "No, but it seemed like it might bother you." And he paused for a moment. He said, "What do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, let me tell you something. I want to be the church where people show up. And I want to be the type of church man and pastor that when they do show up, I give them the good news that Jesus paid it all. Because you never know. There may come a day when they'll show up that one time and then come again and again and again. That's what I'm looking for. It's an opportunity. So, what kind of church are you? What kind of worship do you have this week on this Monday of Holy Week? I pray that your worship is not the kind that would find Jesus saying, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers by your heart." I pray to God that is not so. God bless you. Have a blessed Monday.